While Christmas has come and gone, the great game deals still persist, and in this video, we're gonna go over 10 awesome PlayStation 4 game deals under $15. A lot of great games to go over, so let's get right into this with the first game. Journey for $6. Journey was an excellent indie-style title that was actually released on the PlayStation 3, and at the time of its release, it took the gaming world by storm for its visual and auditory art design, very unique presentation. There is no dialogue in Journey. It's a game where you just go through on a journey, and you can play the game with a complete stranger online, and it's a very moving and emotional game when you go through the whole thing. It's got great visuals, a great soundtrack, and if it's a game you haven't played yet, it's a game you should. It's one of the most unique gaming experiences that you're gonna come across, and for $6, it's a bargain. Bastion for $4. Bastion is also one of the amazing indie-style games in recent memory. It's developed by Supergiant Games, who have worked on some other terrific games, more on those in a little bit. It was published by Warner Brothers, and in the game you play as a kid as he moves through floating and fantasy-themed environments, and you fight different enemies. What's really great about Bastion is the presentation. The art style is excellent, narrative is really well told as well. It's got a pretty good amount of content being a smaller title, and for just $4, Bastion's another game you should definitely check out.
Distillery, chock full of the finest spirits. An arsenal, packing enough heat to remind the beast of the wild who's boss. Or even that shrine, in case the gods ain't dead.
Final Fantasy 15 for $14.99. Final Fantasy 15 was one of the most anticipated games of this generation, and while many would say it didn't live up to expectations, it was still a very good open-world RPG that just faltered on the storytelling a little bit. However, Square Enix has done a magnificent job of keeping the Final Fantasy 15 experience updated and fresh. They're consistently adding content. Some of it's free, and then the DLC episodes are really good as well. Some would say that those episodes are even better than the main game. They've also just added a multiplayer component, Comrades, and we do know that more content for the game is coming in 2018. While Final Fantasy 15 isn't representative of the whole Final Fantasy ecosystem and the style of game that Final Fantasy fans are accustomed to, it is a great open world RPG that's packed with content, and for just $14.99 on Newegg after a promo code, it is a steal.
The throne and the only son of King Regis, his dislike of the restrictions of the royal family and his casual attitude belies his strong desire to protect those around him. In combat, Noctis wields spectral weapons which he forges from thin air, a power possessed by...
Infamous Second Son for $8. Initially, the PlayStation 4 wasn't packed with a lot of exclusives, especially at launch. Killzone Shadowfall didn't really live up to expectations, and while Resogun was really good, it was a smaller title. The PlayStation 4 really got its first marquee exclusive with Infamous Second Son. It was the latest game from Sucker Punch and a part of the Infamous franchise, which made a big impact on the PlayStation 3, and while I wouldn't say that Second Son is as good as Infamous or Infamous 2, obviously from a visual perspective it is much better. The gameplay falters a little bit content-wise, but overall it is a great open-world adventure and really showcases the technical power of the PlayStation 4. And it's an absolute blast to explore the open-world Seattle, and now for just $8 on PSN, if you've yet to play Infamous Second Son, and I don't blame you, it's one of the early titles, now is the time to check it out.
Alright, I got this whole thing figured out. We hit the town, and maybe swing by the Space Needle, always wanted to see it, and then we're back home to save some lives.
Bloodborne the Complete Edition for $14. While Infamous Second Son could be considered the first marquee exclusive on PlayStation 4, Bloodborne was probably the first true exclusive system seller for the console. It was heavily anticipated, a game by From Software, who are best known for the Souls game, and Bloodborne is obviously of a similar style, but there are different elements. It is set in a Victorian era, and that setting is great. It's a very atmospheric game, from the audio to the presentation, and of course the gameplay is really great as well. Obviously, difficulty-wise, it is more difficult than a lot of games, but it's very fair at the same time. With the Complete Edition, you get the base Bloodborne game as well as the Old Hunters DLC, so that is a great pickup for just $14. Gravity Rush Remastered for $12. Gravity Rush was one of the great games on the PlayStation Vita, but obviously I assume that many of you guys don't own a PlayStation Vita, so you probably never checked out the game. However, it was later released onto the PlayStation 4 in the form of Gravity Rush Remastered, and it's a great way to experience a very underrated game by Sony Japan Studio. Gravity Rush is a very aesthetically pleasing game. You play as a girl named Kat, and she has gravity manipulation power. The gameplay in this game is very different than any other game, and that's one of the key selling points. On top of that, you've got beautiful art and a solid world to explore. Now that it's down to just $12, it's time that you check out Gravity Rush, and after you play through Gravity Rush Remastered, you'll probably be so enamored with the game that you'll also want to check out Gravity Rush 2. Uncharted the Nathan Drake Collection for $8. If you have a recent PlayStation platform and you somehow have not played Uncharted, you're really doing yourself and the console a disservice, but you can change that very inexpensively with the Uncharted the Nathan Drake Collection, which includes the first 3 Uncharted games, the 3 games that were released on the PlayStation 3. You get them on the PlayStation 4, better visuals, better performance, all that jazz, and it's a great way to revisit the games. The only real drawback is you don't get the multiplayer component for Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3, but the single player modes are still well worth it, and while the first Uncharted game hasn't aged all too well, Uncharted 2 and Uncharted 3 are still fantastic games, and of course after you play all 3 of those, you'll also want to check out Uncharted 4. You can get the Nathan Drake Collection for just $8 on PSN.
Small beginnings. Just what is it you're after?
It's just a little historical research.
Don't tell me you're buying into all that supernatural nonsense.
You love all this as much as...
Transistor for $5. We talked about Supergiant Games' Bastion earlier, and Transistor was their second game, and this is also another game that's very good, but mechanically is very different. Presentation-wise, it has all the strengths of Bastion though. The visuals and soundtrack are very strong, and the game has so much style behind it. Gameplay-wise, it is a very interesting blend of strategic and RPG mechanics. It's a very good game, and for just $5, you should definitely check it out.
Us again. They'll find you and finish the job. Unless you find them first. You always have a plan.
Pyre for $10. Why don't we mention the third and latest Supergiant game as well with Pyre, which is also a very good game, a more recent release coming out back in July of this year. And Pyre has you control a character that was exiled from society, and he quickly meets other exiles, forms a party, and they cleanse their souls through defeating other exiles. Once again, Supergiant Games did a phenomenal job with Pyre. Great storytelling, great artistic design, and great music. While all of these qualities are present in all of Supergiant Games, they're presented in a different way, and all 3 of their games are distinct but quality-filled experiences. I would definitely check out Bastion to start out, as it is the cheapest, and then Transistor as it's the second cheapest, but Pyre is also very good, and $10 for it is pretty good considering it's a very recent release.
Gain enlightenment. Who goes free? Who remains? You decide.
And finally, Oxenfree for $5. Oxenfree was a game that was developed and published by a studio known as Night School Studio, and that isn't a studio many of you are probably familiar with. However, they are composed of developers that worked on a lot of the Telltale games, and that definitely shines through in Oxenfree, a very story-driven game with a group of teenagers that go on a weekend trip, and you see them develop right before your eyes. And what's great about Oxenfree is that it's a very relatable game. They really nailed how teenagers act in this evolutionary phase, and the story is very good. It starts off kind of normal, but then supernatural beings are introduced, and yeah, all that mumbo jumbo, but it is a great game, and a game that went very under the radar. So if you've yet to play it for $5 on PSN, you should definitely check it out.
Here a lot as a kid, right? You used to come here a lot as a kid.
Something's wrong.
So that wraps up 10 awesome PlayStation 4 game deals available for under $15 right now. A lot of great options post-Christmas, so check some of these out. And we also hope that all of you guys had a very Merry Christmas. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.